Hello, gentlemen, and everybody listening, and welcome back to episode 3 of Empty the Playbook. Shapland, how's your week been, geez? How you doing?
Yeah, no, it's been all right. I mean, it's lockdown. It's been fun. No football, no American football. Just sitting and staring, watching paint dry, pretty much. But
Well,
yeah,
there's been rugby this weekend. Did you watch?
moving on. I didn't so much watch as shout in anger for. But I think I turned it off before Wales even scored their last try. I rage quit in about the 75th minute. I couldn't deal.
Yeah, to be fair, I would have if I was an England fan by then. To be fair, I would have probably quit after the first. Well, actually, you got back into it. I think if it was a bit more one-sided at halftime, I probably would have quit. But yeah, those first two tries for Wales didn't exactly go your way. But I mean, I'll take it. Thanks, Pascal. But yeah, for people that don't know, I'm Welsh and the boys are English.
Irish.
English.
Get me involved.
You live
I'm
in
Irish. I'm gonna have an Irish passport soon.
Is
Are
it?
you?
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, right. Well, on that note, Thorns, how was your week? Ireland beat Italy. If you care about rugby.
Yeah. It was all right. It's been good. I've got a lot of work done, which has been nice. And yeah, I had a blood test as well today, which was quite nice. Well, not nice, but nice
Interesting choice of adjective.
nice to get done. Nice to get done.
Yeah.
And yeah, other than that, just making the most of what I can do at home.
Definitely, boys. I had a look earlier, and we're pretty close to the start of free agency, gentlemen. I think we're about 2 weeks away, which is pretty exciting, to be honest. Which is why, talking about all the things we've done that we talked about over the past couple of weeks. In my head, we were talking about it like it was like a year away, because like the thing I probably get most hyped for in the off season is the draft, and that does seem like years and years away because it's April the 29th. But the official new league year begins and the start of free agency on March the 17th, which is 16 days away. 16 days away. Whatever. We're on the 1st of March. So that's 16. It's a good thing I'm a teacher.
If it's wrong.
holding the minds of the youth.
Yeah, I know. So sorry to the children in my class. But yeah, so we are very, very close, which is very, very exciting. And so I guess with that in mind, let's talk some football, gentlemen. So the first kind of point of conversation that I wanted to bring up this week and talk about is that obviously now we're in the part of the off season just before free agency starts, where teams have to decide if they want to franchise tag or transition tag some of their guys that are potentially leaving. And obviously some guys are deserving and really want that franchise tag. Some guys think they're better than that. Some guys aren't quite worth that franchise tag. So I kind of said to you, I think I wanted you to find one guy that absolutely this team has to tag this guy and keep him on the team, and one guy that you think, they can let him go. And so, with that in mind, kicking us off this week, Thorns, go on.
Oh.
On the edge of your seats there.
Okay. Well, I'll start with not to tag because it's a little bit not controversial, but it's sort of a bit of a cop out. So, not to tag, I've gone Tampa Bay, Shaq Barrett. So, I think Barrett obviously played on the tag this year, and I think it's going to cost them $19 million to keep him next year, which is a lot of money for an edge rusher. But Barrett has obviously proved he's worth that money. Back-to-back seasons of I don't know how many, but a lot of sacks. And I think to tag him would be a mistake because I think he needs to be signed to a long-term deal. And if Tampa Bay, want to keep him, then that's definitely the way that they should go. And they have a lot of other players who could potentially be tagged. Or I say a lot, I mean, there's one name in particular who I think we're going to get to later. So yeah, and the way that Barrett's played over the last 2 years, the role that he had in them getting to and winning the Super Bowl, I don't think he's someone that you should just tag and tag and tag. I think he's someone that you need to lock in for 4, maybe 5 years as a key player in that defense. So yeah, guy to keep. I've gone for John Johnson the third out of the LA Rams, or from the LA Rams. I was really torn. I think there's so many players that you could look at and say this guy should get tagged, this guy should get tagged, this guy should get tagged. So I sort of tried to look at it from a perspective of who has the most to prove, not who has the most to prove, but who is more valuable on a 1-year deal. So initially I was thinking Will Fuller and maybe he can get a full season under his belt, prove he's a number 1 receiver. But Johnson is so much more interesting in that he was one of the top 2 safeties when it comes to run and pass defense last year. He was a key cog in the Rams defense, which was one of the best in the league last year. And even more interesting is that behind him are 2 very talented young safeties in Taylor Rapp and Jordan Fuller. So his position is if you sign him to a long deal, you're going to maybe stunt the growth of these 2 young safeties who played really well last year and the last couple of years. So I think Johnson bringing back on a 1-year deal. Safeties also, I think, have the lowest cap hit for the franchise tag, or one of the lowest. I think it's around 11 million.
Yeah, 10, 11 mil.
Yeah.
So it's decent value for someone that's playing it. I'll talk about it in a second.
So bringing back for 1 year, this Rams team have shown they're a team that want to win now. They want to bring as much talent as they can at this one point. And Johnson is a very, very talented player. So bring him back on a 1-year deal, going back to win now mode for another season. If it doesn't work and they want to focus on Fuller and Rapp going forwards, then they can just let him walk next year. If it does work and he proves he's too unexpendable, if he proves that he's not expendable at all, then re-sign him to a long-term deal and live with the consequences.
Indispensable was the word you're looking for, I think. But
indispensable.
There you go. That'll do. Shaps, thoughts?
I don't know about that, but
what's your beef, son?
Oh dear. I've got nothing against Shaq Barrett, but I think the kind of money he's going to be after, I don't think for a Super Bowl winning team, I think it's important you don't get too caught up in tying long term. Yes, he contributed a lot to winning the Super Bowl. Yes, he's been great for him. But I feel it's a trap that a lot of teams fall into. Oh, we had a great season. Quickly, let's tie everyone down to long-term deals. And then, boom, you don't have the cash. You don't have the money to start, going for people you want. Which actually sort of brings me on a bit to my point on John Johnson. Again, I think you're completely correct when you say, the Rams are in win now mode. I mean, they've got no first-round picks for God knows how long, 3 years or something. But so they're very much in win now mode. They've got Stafford, who I think is an amazing QB. But I'd also say, like you said, they have got talented young safeties back there. I'd say it's time to sink or swim. I'd say let them walk, spend the money elsewhere, and let your safeties prove why they're getting the hype and sort of show them a bit of trust in the management, and then use the money to fill other positions like linebacker. But if I was the Rams, that'd be my personal opinion.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. I think for the Bucks this off season, I think the main things that they have to consider is looking after that defense, which I will kind of get to in my analysis, but or my picks rather. But yeah, I think Shaq Barrett, is underrated. Maybe he has had a down year statistically, but he also does share a line with JPP, who has been playing fantastic, and Ndamukong Suh, who probably isn't going to be there next year, but there are some absolute ballers on that defense. And so maybe his stats have fallen by the wayside because of other reasons. But yeah, I do think he's a very good player. And John Johnson is someone that is also very good. And like you said, 10 mil for tagging him is very good money. And especially the point you raised of the Rams being win now. The Rams have last 4 or 5 years have been of the mindset of let's win now. by the way that they've actively gone out and got Jalen Ramsey, Marcus Peters before that. Like they're always of the mindset that why shouldn't we be in the conversation every year? And so, yeah, I think it's a good model for success that bringing someone back on a 1-year deal that isn't quite at that kind of like superstar status yet. Because I think that's the stigma with the franchise tag or transition tag as well, is that if you're someone that's already proven yourself, like Shaq Barrett kind of has past few seasons, do you have not necessarily the ego, but do you already have that credibility in the league to go, no, I'm better than the franchise tag, pay me what you owe me? So, you know,
I definitely see what you're both saying. I think they're more like contentious picks. I don't think they're like, 100% cast iron, definitely gonna be tagged, definitely shouldn't be tagged. But I think the thing that stood out for me, I think that makes Barrett so sort of fresh in my mind is him in the playoffs and the way that he dominated in Green Bay and against Kansas City, against their backups, but whatever. So yeah, that would be that.
We'll throw it over to Shaps. Thanks, Thorns. Good picks.
Right, yeah. So I'll start off with my keep franchise tag, which I've got down as Kenny Golladay. I'm as a fantasy owner of Kenny Golladay, I was not a fan of his this year with his injury-plagued season. But I don't think they should keep him. I think it's a tag to trade situation, in my opinion. You're talking about a team that's just traded away, in my opinion, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL by a fair way. He's definitely in the conversation, I think, for up there for one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, Matthew Stafford.
Where you putting him? Top 5, top 10? I'm intrigued to know.
Tough one. I'd probably say top 5. You only have to look at how some of the other quarterbacks in the league talk about him. If you ever hear Aaron Rodgers speak about Stafford, he's in his opinion, Rodgers literally says Stafford can do things I can't do. He's in the Mahomes. He literally compares him to Mahomes all the time. I think he's special. It's just he's had the Megatron effect of being stuck with the Lions, which is obviously sort of dampened him. But yeah, so I think it's a tag to trade. If they tag him and keep him, I think it's a bit silly because in my opinion they're in rebuild mode. There's no they've got Goff, who I don't think is a great QB. They've gone for another head coach. Like, they're in rebuild mode. There's no two ways about it. And having a pricey receiver in a rebuild is a bit sort of counterintuitive. If they could sign him long term and try and rebuild with him, but in my opinion, it's best to tag him. I reckon you could get a 2nd round draft pick for him. Tag him, get a 2nd round draft pick, keep building for the future, because they've got no present. So yeah, I was quite proud of that.
Very poetic.
And then for my ditch, this could come in quite contentiously, but it also might not. So for my ditch, I've got Aaron Jones. Now you might think that's a fairly obvious ditch. However, I looked it up, and his cap hit on the tag is actually only 8 million. However, it's sort of my same point. With John Johnson, the third. Is you've got AJ Dillon. You used the 2nd round pick on AJ Dillon. You gave him 1 start, I think, and he got about 150 yards, 2 TDs. You've got a back who can play. You're not the Browns. You don't need 2 backs. You've got Aaron Rodgers back there. You've got Aaron Rodgers back there slinging passes. You need to spend that money where it's going to help you. If I look at that team, you go, what will it take to take Rodgers to a Super Bowl? Arguably, I think Rodgers would say some better receivers outside of Adams, but I think secondary. You look at that game against Tampa, where their secondary just got shelled because they don't have enough. They have Alexander, but other than that, I don't think they've got enough talent back there. And yeah, they were just getting shelled. And I think one of the best ways to build your team is I remember, I can't remember who it was. I think it was an old Green Bay coach said you draft a team to win your division. So when they were playing against Randy Moss, they used to draft all corners just to try and cover Randy Moss. But I think it's a case of you should build a team to win an NFC championship, because they keep getting there and not getting. So yeah, don't pay the running back, pay a corner, pay a receiver. Give something that's gonna make you beat Tampa, because Tampa's the team to beat at the moment. Obviously, they might have a little fall off this year, but the NFC's got a lot of good teams, and I think they've got a lot of good receivers in the NFC. You got people like Michael Thomas, if not, even though I called him a slant merchant in the last podcast, but still, there are good receivers out there. Basically, is my point, and I'd say 8 million could get you an all right corner on the market, and I think that's more of need to them than a running back right now.
I like it. I like Aaron Jones. I think that he is a great running back, but when you watch the Packers, especially in the playoffs, like it wasn't their running game didn't pop out. It wasn't, oh, Aaron Jones is dominating. And I think I agree with what you say about, winning the NFC Championship. And as great as Jones has been in the regular season, he hasn't shown that in the playoffs. Maybe injuries or fatigue or whatever, but 8 mil is quite a lot of money, and they definitely need to build up elsewhere. I don't know about Golladay. I think to have a number one receiver that's talented, like we spoke about it last week, and to have a guy like that in the franchise for the next 4 or 5 years, who's a young, like up and coming talent, I think you sort of need to lock down some cornerstones. So like the same with the Dolphins, and they got rid of everyone except Xavier Howard and kept him on a big contract. And now that they've sort of rebuilt and come back up again, Howard is again in like right in the thick of it, and a real leader on that team. And also more from like a personal enjoyment perspective, I'd love to see Jared Goff play with a receiver like Golladay, because he's never really had that type of big bodied 50-50 ball winner to go with. He's had like Woods and Cup and Watkins, Cooks, all like smaller, still bigger than us, but still guys who aren't like that type of threat. And I think it would just be really interesting to see how Goff uses him. But obviously that's not at all relevant in the long run. But yeah, I like it.
My turn. And I think my person to get rid of might be quite controversial. I've gone with Chris Godwin, receiver for the Bucks, who I think is like a very good player, elite receiver, but on a team where there are a lot of very good guys. And I kind of alluded to it earlier that I think the defense was underrated this season and was for the Bucks and the backbone of that Super Bowl win, really. And I just think they need to ensure that defense stays class. So making sure that people like Barrett stay on the team, and Levante David, who's been around that team for years, deserves, that contract to be on that team that he's stuck with throughout everything. I just think, obviously they've got Mike Evans already, elite receiver. Scotty Miller was better than expected this season. I don't think anyone expected Scotty Miller to be as good as he was. And AB, Antonio Brown, was a steal. And he just made that work. And he's going to want to come back and play with Tom Brady and go for it again. And the estimation that PFF have got on him is 2 mil for the year on Antonio Brown. For a guy that was, 2 seasons removed from being like top 3 receiver in the league. Like, granted, he's had his off-field issues, but he balled out this season. And there was times where he was back to being that same receiver that he was a few years ago. So I just think Chris Godwin, as elite as he is, could be expendable. And that word keeps cropping up. But could be someone that could be viable to be out the door, because they've got a wealth of talent at receiver and pass catchers in general, including like obviously Gronk and Cameron Brate, who's very good at catching Lombardi trophies. And he'll probably want another one next year. I hope he doesn't, but but yeah, so I think, sorry, Chris Godwin, you're a very, very, very good player, but I think the Bucks need to put their money elsewhere. And my guy who had to be kept, and this potentially has changed within the last few hours, which I'll get to in a second, I chose Hassan Reddick, the outside linebacker for the Arizona Cardinals, who had 12.5 sacks this season and was really, really good. This might have changed now. I mean, I think if they can still keep him with the franchise tag, it'd be very, very good. But this has changed a bit now because obviously it's just been announced a few hours ago that the Cardinals are signing JJ Watt, which is sick and I think very cool. And it took me way too long to realize that it was because he was like joining up with D-Hop again. I don't know why I didn't make that assumption straight away, but I didn't think of that straight away. But there you go. But yeah, reasons why they should keep Reddick. And bearing in mind, these were all kind of written before the JJ Watt news, but I'm going to go through them anyway, and they kind of still make sense. So if they can make it work financially, he'd be great. So they've kept Vance Joseph, who was their DC last year, who was a very, it was potentially was going to go somewhere else to be a head coach. Granted, he wasn't the best head coach for the Broncos a couple of years ago, but very strong candidate to be a head coach somewhere else. The mindset this season of the Cardinals, as far as I'm aware, is to make that defense better. That offense is kind of like in a pretty decent shape. They've got their number one receiver. They've got their quarterback. Well, as far as I'm aware, I think they believe that they've got their quarterback. Got a decent line, depending on what they do with kind of like Justin Pugh this offseason. So as far as I'm aware, this offseason is about making that defense better. Thornsy, what are you thinking? Not a lot.
Yeah. No, yeah, I like it. I mean, Reddick was one of my start choices before the JJ Watt trade as well. Signing, sorry.
Don't apologize to me.
Let me do it again. Before the JJ Watt signing.
Nailed it.
For the edit.
For the edit.
Anyway. But I think Reddick, like, obviously prior to JJ Watt signing, Reddick exemplifies what the tag is sort of there for, is to give a guy a year to see if he is as good as he was for like a part of the last season. So Reddick, like moving to edge rusher, had like an awesome second half to the year, and then that's where the Cardinals could sort of be like, do we bring him back? But then I agree with what Shaps is saying, where I don't think Reddick ever flashed talent to the point where you'd pay him 15 mil plus a season. Like, that's where I'd sort of draw the line on it. But if he is that sort of a talent and you bring him back and you have Chandler Jones, arguably the best pass rusher of the last 5 years, and JJ Watt, and a really talented linebacking core in Arizona, like, that's going to be really, really cool and definitely offset the problems that Arizona will have with coverage. Like, so yeah, pre JJ Watt, I love it. Post, I don't know. I don't know if it will happen. Yeah. Chris Godwin, I just think he's too good to let go. Like, I really think he's one of the top 5 receivers in the league right now. Like, but then that's like a double-edged sword. Like, on one hand, you think keep him with Mike Evans, keep him with young guys like Scotty Miller, and also Tyler Johnson, who was a rookie this year, who played sick for Tampa Bay.
Oh yeah, of course. I forgot to throw in his name as well. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's a double-edged sword. Where on one hand, you think you want to keep seeing Godwin and Evans and Miller and Johnson and potentially Brown, and see what they can do and see the fits that they give defensive coordinators. But on the other hand, you think, I'd love to see Chris Godwin be the number one guy somewhere else.
Would you allude to more of a tag and trade situation then?
I personally, I hate the idea of tag and trade, because I think it just takes all sport, it takes all like self-determination away from the athletes and brings them back into this pre-Kurt Flood reserve clause era. But if the Bucs are looking at losing him completely compared to getting him for like a young talent or a 3rd, 4th round pick from a business perspective, I mean, maybe, yeah, that's what they should do.
The flip side of the tag and trade, well, there's quite a few kind of negatives to it, I suppose. Kind of like you said already, Thorns, is that it almost takes it away from whoever the athlete may be. Other negative is that you have to eat that cap. If you trade him away, that cap is your dead money to, do what you want with, I suppose. Well, you can't do anything with it, it's dead. So yeah, I think it's quite interesting kind of talking about the Bucs. When you think, like, obviously we talked about Scotty Miller there, and I mentioned Levante David earlier, and one of the things we mentioned in a previous podcast is Levante David making that jump in his second year to the elite player that he was this week. this year, sorry. Which, is great to see. I don't think he might have been expected to make that jump this year. But for a lot of people, didn't see it coming, and it's really awesome when guys kind of make that jump from when they weren't expected to. But we're going to talk about some guys that we think in their second year are going to be even better and potentially elite. So with that in mind, Shapland.
Right. So yeah, I had a little think about, and I decided, I don't really know why, but I decided I wanted to do this on a receiver. And obviously you got the obvious option of like
Donovan Peoples-Jones.
Oh, don't. So yeah, obviously as a Browns fan, I thought about Donovan Peoples-Jones for a second, and then obviously you've got OBJ coming back, and he'll be the fourth choice receiver if they bring back Higgins as well.
Who,
so
OBJ?
Yes, OBJ will be the fourth string receiver.
To be fair, they played that well when he got injured at the end of last season. He may well be, but anyway, it's your turn to talk. I'll stop.
Yeah, so I was thinking about some of the receivers. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb had a great season. I thought you got Dak Prescott coming back. And then I was like, what about T. Higgins? He's got Joe Burrow coming back. I was like, 900 yards. He also had some touchdowns. I can't remember how many he had, but he had a few. He had the third most receiving yards behind Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb, and that's with Joe Burrow injured. And then I was like, you know what? Joe Burrow, I think he's not getting the sort of respect he deserves for what he did. Like, you think, obviously, he didn't finish his season. He started 10 games and played in 10 games before the Bengals bengaled and decided to just let him die out there. But yeah, like, I look at his stats. Like, he had 2,688 yards, 13 TDs and 5 picks. In my opinion, that puts him on track to get about 4,000 yards, 20 touchdowns, maybe like 9 picks or so. And I'm thinking, if that's my rookie QB, those stats would be great. Obviously, he got overshone a bit in the end by Herbert, who was outstanding, even on awful franchise. But yeah, so he got overshone a bit. Sorry, I thought you were looking to chip in there, Dan, as I jab at your Chargers.
No, I had my turn to talk. I'm just taking your jabs now.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, yeah. So I think Joe Burrow he's going to be back. What was his issues? Obviously, the offensive line was a big issue, and I'm hoping Cincinnati are going to address that in the draft. If I'm being honest, they need to address it in the draft. They've got a franchise QB. I mean, like I say, his stats. He's playing in the AFC North. Like, it's hard to put up. I know Big Ben's done it, but like you don't see, like, it's an outdoor division with bad weather. It's not an easy place. He's not playing in a dome. He's not Drew Brees just throwing passes. That's no disrespect to Drew Brees, by the way, but he's not pinging passes indoors with no wind. He's playing an outdoor, which I think was part of his deficiencies. Came with his deep passing wasn't great, but obviously his deep passing can't be great if his O-line's not giving him the time to pass. So I think it's all sort of goes hand in hand together. As long as they protect him, I think he'll absolutely ball out next year. I'm expecting good things, which as a Browns fan is annoying. I'm hoping he plays really well and his team doesn't, just so the Bengals remain at the bottom of the AFC North, which would be the dream.
Nice. Right, yeah, I'll give you the jabs back now. No, I'm just shaking. No, I really like it, and I think it would have been an interesting conversation had Burrow not got injured for Offensive Rookie of the Year. I mean, it was obviously already debatable whether Herbert should have won or Jefferson, but throw Burrow into the mix as well, who, like you said, played so well behind a very sketchy O-line. It's really, really interesting.
I was actually going to go with the Bengals for my team. Worst to first pick for the next section. And I think a lot of it is because of the reasons you said, like Joe Burrow coming back, the weapons he has, and the Bengals defense, and that's the way they're going to play together is really going to be exciting to see. And I think the O-line sort of leads on to a bigger point of how's Joe Burrow going to be when he gets back from his injury. Like, you can talk all about mobility and his ability to escape the pocket and make off-platform throws and that sort of thing. But from a more sort of human level, you could say does he trust his O-line? Like, is he going to be willing to stand in the pocket and make throws when he knows he's going to get hit? Like, how is that psychology going to affect it when he comes back? And if they go out and they get Sewell or Rashawn Slater or Christian Darrisaw and they address the tackle position in free agency, and they sort of say to him, look, like, you know, they're going to say we messed up and we didn't protect you, and then say, and Burrow's going to come back and say, look, like, thanks for that. I'm going to go out. I'm not scared anymore. Not that he was ever scared, but you know, that sort of thing. And also, you diss Drew Brees, like you're losing all these big listeners that we have, and you're just like fobbing them off with these insults.
I never dissed Drew Brees. I just said I think Drew Brees is one of the best quarterbacks of all time. I want that, you know, on record, because I know he's listening. But yeah, I think he's an amazing QB. But I think not any QB, but I think playing inside is always going to boost your stats. Like, he's got, I think, the highest completion percentage across his career of all time. But is he the best? Is he the most accurate quarterback of all time? It's debatable, but I'd say maybe not.
From the AFC North to the NFC North, my pick for second-year leap is Deandre Swift of the Detroit Lions on a roster that is not so hot. On an offense that should be better than it is, really. But that's a conversation for another day. Deandre Swift started looking good down the stretch, man. Showing that he could rush, showing that he could receive. Finished the season with 57 receptions. Only 357 receiving yards, but 2 receiving touchdowns. But in terms of rushing, he was 4.6 yards per carry. And I know he was part of a committee with AP and some other person. Who's the other one? Sorry. Oh, yeah, Kerryon Johnson, of course it is. Yeah. And so I know it was running back by committee last season, but I think he showed flashes. I mean, even the first, I think it was week 1, where or maybe week 2, where he could have won the game and he dropped the winning catch. I know that's a negative, but like, he's getting himself in positions where he can win games. And I think that experience will now come. And I think especially now, if they let Golladay walk, if they let Marvin Jones walk, he's almost the superstar on this offense now. And so, you know, there's real potential for him to take that on his shoulders and rise to the occasion, especially with, as I kind of mentioned earlier, them getting in Anthony Lynn at offensive coordinator, who loves making sure the running game gets the respect it deserves. And he likes these check downs to his running back and things like that. So there is going to be plenty of chances for DeAndre Swift to ball. And I legitimately think he can ball. I think he's such a good running back. And I think that's something that has been teased to the Detroit Lions fans in the past couple of years. Everyone thought Amir Abdullah was going to be the guy, and then they thought Kerryon Johnson was going to be the guy. I really think DeAndre Swift can make that second-year leap and become that running back or the franchise running back for quite a long time.
Yeah, well, I don't know what that was from Shaps, but
yeah, I'm glad this is audio and not visual.
This is a serious podcast. Drew Brees listens to it. Anyway,
I get excited when people talk about running backs. What can I say?
Anyway, yeah, DeAndre Swift is a baller. He was crazy to watch in the build-up to the draft last year, because it was like, what is it that makes him so good? Like, watching the film, watching all this sort of stuff, it's like he doesn't look quick, he doesn't look crazy strong or freakishly strong, but he just sort of does everything. Like, he breaks tackles, he makes big runs. He showed that in the NFL as well. I've got 2 points. So firstly, I think the Detroit O-line, like the interior O-line, is really, really good, and they don't really get the respect that they deserve. Maybe it's because, like, if you do a deep dive, you'll see they're not that good. I don't know about that, but from my perspective, watching the NFL, I've always thought they have a good interior O-line, which obviously helps. But on like another point, I think there's like worrying comparison to the 2016 Rams team. And, you know, Todd Gurley broke out as a rookie, had an awesome season, brought in Jared Goff, but there was just no support on the outside, and the teams weren't scared of the passing threat that the Rams had. And if the Lions do get rid of Golladay, or Golladay doesn't stay healthy, and obviously they lose Jones and they don't have that receiving threat, I don't think that Swift is going to be able to take off in the way that we envision, because I think teams are just going to be so keyed in on the run, and that's really going to limit his effectiveness. That'd be my only like question or dare say criticism. Yeah.
Dare you say? No, you raise a valid point, and I think in terms of this, that might be the kind of thing in terms of this particular kind of activity, if you want to call it that, where we're talking about specifically a second-year leap. That might be the obstacle. If this was an sort of activity where we're talking like long term, then maybe that doesn't hinder him as much. But also maybe it does. Maybe the fact that, and I'm almost disagreeing with myself here, but maybe the fact that he potentially is that kind of like I described it, the superstar on that team next year will almost negatively affect him, where he's got to take the weight of the team or the offense specifically on his shoulders. Even with Jared Goff, who's now a veteran, so to speak. If he's got to take that team on his shoulders, especially at the running back position where you are taking hit after hit after hit, is that going to wear and tear on his body? And, these days there aren't lots and lots of running backs that last to a good level in their even early 30s nowadays. Guys fall off so much quicker at running back position because especially with teams playing running back by committee. But, I think, like you said, kind of the potential's there. And he has shown a lot of flashes that he can do both rushing and receiving. And I think that's so important nowadays. Like Alvin Kamara is, and these Christian McCaffreys, these guys that can do both is so important. And if you can find a guy that can do both, I think that's something to hold on to and really look after. So hopefully he is in the position. If it's something that's out of his control, where he can't make that leap, then, that might be the thing. But, if it is in his control, I fully believe that he can. But, we can only talk offense for so long because as far as I'm aware, Thornsy, you've got a pick to shake that up.
Yes, sir, I do. Some guy is a guy we were really high on before the draft last year, Isaiah Simmons, out of Clemson, now Arizona Cardinal. Anyway, it was interesting though, looking back at the guys I tagged to potentially talk about, they're, other than Simmons, they're all offense. And I don't know if that's just because I'm an offensive player, so I recognize that more or what. But yeah.
I think things like fantasy football have a big impact as well. The fact that you only pick sort of offensive players, the guys you look for, just, subconsciously you naturally look at them more. But
yeah. So yeah, Simmons, I think Isaiah Simmons is a little bit of a cop-out because he was all rookie first team and he did significantly improve throughout the second half of the season. But I know for the first sort of 8 to 10 games, there was a big discussion of well, what's going on? Why isn't he playing? Why is he playing less than 30% of snaps all this time? And there was an interview where he said after the season, it wasn't until I got that interception against Seattle and sort of showed that I could belong in the league that my snaps started to increase, and I started to prove to my teammates and my coaches that I was NFL ready. And I think that's partly because of the lack of an off season and the lack of a preseason that these rookies had. And for someone like Simmons, who's so versatile and his role isn't definitive. He played in college all over the place. He comes to the NFL and they want to just play middle linebacker. He's got to learn that. He's got to develop his talent in that regard. He's got to improve his tackling, all this sort of stuff. And no preseason really definitely looks to have damaged that in him. So I think now with a full off season under his belt and just learning, getting more NFL ready physically, I think is really going to help his development in his second year. And as a linebacker, like who better to come in and play in front of you than JJ Watt, like in his signing. I think that he really sort of comes in and adds a layer of protection for a young guy who's going to be potentially a little bit slow in getting to those gaps and then reading key and who he's got to take and what gap he's got to blitz. And I really don't know anything about defensive run games, but still. But I think one thing to look for next season is how the Cardinals use him. Like, how is he gonna do what he did in college and play slot corner and safety? And I think he even played outside corner, edge rusher, all this stuff. Or is he just going to say, look, I want to be middle linebacker. I want to be in one position, master that craft, and then start to reach out once I get better. So I think similar to what Shaps was saying about Swift, I think Simmons is someone who we might not hear about him next year. We might hear, oh, he's improved, oh, he's a good starter, but it's not till like year 3 or 4 where he really starts to expand his game. And that's where we're like, whoa, this guy is a game-changing talent all over the field. And I think also just one last point is he reminds me a bit of Minkah Fitzpatrick when Fitzpatrick played for the Dolphins. One of the reasons he wanted to trade was that he said, look, you're playing me all over the place. I want to just get this one position. I want to be a deep safety. I want to like get that area nailed down. And the Dolphins didn't see it that way. And now he's gone to the Steelers and he's become, I think it was all pro last year as a deep safety. So, that could be a comparison for Simmons as well.
Nice pick, bro. I think it's really interesting with these kind of players that are almost like a Swiss Army knife that can play multiple positions. I think it's almost like kind of when guys get recruited for college and they're almost described as their position is athlete or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's quite interesting that their position isn't nailed down yet. It's they come in and you already know that this guy is going to be a good player wherever we figure out what his position is. So my kind of question to you is that taking kind of a guy that is that Swiss Army knife kind of role, do you think that's something that you go, yes, I want to take him because I know he's a guaranteed athlete, and so we'll figure out his position later? Or do you think it is just a massive risk and he could have been a massive bust?
Well, I think it really depends on the player. Like, obviously, using the Fitzpatrick example, it seems like if he's an athlete, he's an athlete, and wherever he plays, he'll make an impact. And if we get in that one position, he'll be great. But then on the flip side of the coin, you see Derwin James and the way that he's played as not as a like traditional anything. He's been. I mean, he almost won Rookie of the Year. If it wasn't for Darius Leonard, he would have easily taken Rookie of the Year. Like defensively, there weren't many rookies better than him, and he came in straight away and thrived in that like positionless role. And I think a lot of it's to do with position as well. Like as a defender, I think it's potentially as a defender, as a defensive back, I think it's easier to be a bit more versatile. Like your job description is tackling, is covering, is lining up in the slot on the outside, in the deep center field, in the box. Whereas I think for like a front seven defender, it's a bit more physical. Like there's a bit more of an art to being an edge rusher, and I think that's what we've seen with Reddick last year. Was it takes time to develop your technique and your get off and your ability to beat tackles. So I don't think it's as like cut and dry as like some guys can, some guys can't. I think it's like position and supporting cast. Like I think there's a lot of things, but I think ultimately, if someone is as good at an athlete as Simmons and has shown he can play everywhere, you've kind of got to take the risk, because even if it doesn't pay off, like he's that talented that he can find a position and he can then thrive in that position. So that was a very long-winded answer, but I hope I hit the point.
Yeah, so I like your pick, and I don't like your pick, if I'm being honest. So I think Simmons is an absolute baller, no two ways about it. And if you listen to Dan, he's going to have Reddick and JJ Watt in front of him next year, which will be an awesome duo to have.
Yeah, mate, they're all going. Shaq Barrett's going as well.
So yeah, but my main issue is, like you said, is I think one of the things that really held him back in his rookie season was being positionless. Because you talk about the lack of hands-on contact they had with players and the amount of time they had with players, he's a person he's not learning to play corner. He's learning to play slot corner, outside corner, safety, linebacker. He's learning to play everywhere. And I think that is hampering him. He's end of the day, he's joining the NFL. It's not college. I know you do get people like Derwin James. He could be as good, if not better than Derwin James at what he does. But he's just playing, pick a position and play him. And until they do, I think until they do let him get comfortable, he's not going to have that second year splurge like we're looking for. So I think he really needs to find his position. Like I think about someone like Charles Woodson, college. He won the Heisman by playing all over the shop. Played offense. Played offense. Played everywhere on defense. Did basically whatever the hell he wanted in college because he was that good an athlete. Which is a similar case to Simmons, Oakland legend, as I'm sure you love him. But yeah, he played everywhere. He got to the NFL and he stuck to a position and then you look at people like Fitzpatrick. I think Fitzpatrick is actually a really good comp. I think because he's someone who had the exact same thing happen to him, where he was stuck at the Dolphins. I think it was actually his mum tweeted the Dolphins and tweeted the GM of the Dolphins and said, "Get my boy out of the box, or he's gone," or something like that. But yeah,
he is a great athlete, and if he doesn't develop into a slot corner, edge rusher hybrid, then at the end of the day, he should still be a great middle linebacker. And you can't, if you get a great middle linebacker, you can't complain about the fact that he can't play slot corner. So
yeah. To be fair, there are a lot of guys that could be making that second year leap, and some really nice picks. Mine was obviously the best and the most likely to. For a Detroit Lions team that's probably going to win the NFC North this year. So no, of course I'm joking.
Well, that's getting cut.
What do you mean? The Detroit Lions are 100% winning the NFC North this year. And on that topic,
to be an ESPN rubbish spouting, attention grabbing, I can't think of the actual word I'm trying to say, podcast.
Clickbaity
podcast.
I don't think clickbaity is the word, but
I like it either way.
Yeah. Obviously, I am chatting out of my backside, and the Detroit Lions will not be winning a lot of anything next year. But that is where we're going next in our conversation. And Thorns, you kind of alluded to it earlier, that we're going to discuss teams that we think are quite likely to go from worst to first this year. So that's teams that finish bottom of their division in the 2020 season that are going to end up, in our eyes, potentially finishing first in their division in the 2021 division. And I'm keeping things in the NFC, not the NFC North, but the NFC South. I think the Atlanta Falcons are due a bounce back year. I kind of said in a previous podcast that I really thought the NFC South was going to be even stronger than it actually was this season. Obviously, the Saints and Bucks were head and heels above everybody else, head and shoulders above everybody else. With that being said, there is potential there for the Falcons to become that first team. The Panthers are kind of unsure of what they want to do going forward and who they are. We talked about earlier that the Bucks potentially lose some pieces this off season, and they have to figure out financially what they're going to do and whether they make the right decisions. But there's potential for the Bucks to go downhill, and is going to be a bit of a transition period with the Saints with what they do with Taysom Hill or Jameis going forward, if they keep Jameis on the roster. And yeah, granted, the Saints are very good on paper, and there's not a lot of holes in that roster, but they're also 100 mil over the cap. And there's some decisions to be made on who stays on that roster and who kind of who goes. As for the Falcons themselves, obviously the team in question, I think it's so vital for them now to have that fresh start. They were living under that shadow of that 28-3 comeback, and I think that's haunted them for the past however many seasons, 3, 4, whatever it is. And I think they get this fresh start with a fresh guy in, an offensive-minded coach, a new philosophy, and hopefully they can move in the right direction. I think that offense can be really elite this year. I think Arthur Smith knew how to get the best out of guys. Like, I mean, granted, like AJ Brown was an elite receiver. Like, I mean, we didn't know that coming out, but he's been pretty consistently good his entire career. But he also knew how to get the best out of Corey Davis. He got some great play out of Jonnu Smith after Delaney Walker left. Obviously, Derrick Henry's just a beast anyway, but he knew exactly how to use him. And Tannehill is the key one. Nobody was sure if Tannehill was going to carry on making a career after he left Miami, and he was almost given to Tennessee. He was originally the backup to Mariota, wasn't he, when he went there? And now, look, the roles are reversed, and Tannehill's one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league because Arthur Smith made that offense sick. And that's why the Titans have been competing again the past few seasons, is because that offense, like, people enjoy watching. And so hopefully you can bring that kind of same level of ability to Matt Ryan, who isn't too dissimilar to the way Ryan Tannehill plays football. And some more elite receivers in Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley. He's got the pieces. So why can't he make that work? And why can't he make that offense elite? The only thing they're missing is that elite running back. And as we know from my Deandre Swift pick, elite running backs don't have to be picked in the first round. And there's a couple of guys this year that potentially Travis Etienne falls out the first round from Clemson, potentially Najee Harris later on in the draft. There's potential for this Falcons team to be really good this season, especially with the other teams kind of, up in the air, how their future's going to look. So it'll be interesting to see. But my pick's the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, I want to start off by saying you are talking out your ass. Yeah, I don't think they've got a lot of cap space left as well. I think if I'm the Falcons, we talk about number one receivers. I know they've got Julio, obviously, but Calvin Ridley is an absolute baller of a player. I do want to say that. They have got some really nice pieces on that team, but I don't think they've got the sort of mental fortitude to bring it all together. And potentially, I think they also could do with a new player under center. I think Matt Ryan's had a good career, but I think he's a good player, and I think you're right in their new sort of scheme and coaching should get the best out of him, like it got the best out of Tannehill. But at the same time, Tannehill had Derrick Henry making people bite a lot more on play action, which does help. I don't think they've got the same threat. I know they've got Gurley, but they've got injured Gurley. Oh, they haven't got Gurley anymore. Gurley's gone. Anyway, but my point is I don't think they've got the same run threat that the Titans had to really elevate Tannehill's game. So I think Matt Ryan, he's had a great career, but I think it's time for them to draft a QB at number 4 and look to the future. I think it's a case of, like Thornsy saying earlier, with Golladay, hold on to Calvin Ridley, hold on to some of these good pieces. But I think a lot of the roster needs to be overhauled. I don't think they're far off.
Oh.
If they can, I don't think they're far off going back to winning ways, but I think they need a change. They need something to be different, because at the moment it's all too much of the same. Since 28-3, that is just the Falcons. They get a lead, they never feel comfortable. You need a new Falcons. There was a lot of talk when Baker Mayfield came into the Browns that this is the new look Browns. That's what the Falcons need. They need the new look Falcons. Yeah, no,
you do raise a good point, and that's exactly right, that they were kind of living under that shadow of that 28-3. And my mind immediately goes back to the Cowboys game last year, where they were up by an obscene amount and the Cowboys came back. But yeah, that's what I'm hoping for this season, is that bringing in the new staff and a complete overhaul of that staff hopefully helps get rid of that and start fresh, so that coming in this year, it is just all new and all focused on the future and not looking back. But yeah, no, you do raise some good points, but you're wrong. So It's almost like you are suggesting a potential full-blown rebuild as well, which is interesting.
I don't think they need a full rebuild, but I think they need to, other than like a couple cornerstones, I don't think they're at Lions level, but other than a few, I reckon just keep a few cornerstones and tear out the rest and bring in new players.
Interesting. Thornsy, thoughts? Do you like the Falcons, bro? Doesn't sound positive to start with.
Potentially. I think the Falcons have, like, I like the idea of the division, like, being a bit questionable. But I think there's just way too many question marks about the Falcons roster. Like, and the big one is their young talent going to finally break out and pay off? Like, they have Isaiah Oliver and AJ Terrell at the cornerback spots. You know, are they going to emerge as true cover corners? Is the O-line Caleb McGarry, Chris Lindstrom? Yeah. Sorry, I was looking at my eye. Are they going to be like studs on the O-line? Is Alex Mack potentially going to leave in free agency? Like, is Matt Ryan too far gone? Is Julio too old? There's just so many questions. But I think AJ Brown is a really interesting case here because I think he is a bit like a young Julio, like a guy who wings with that freak athleticism and strength. And so we could maybe see a bit of a Julio like renaissance with Arthur Smith calling the plays.
And again, it's Arthur Smith getting in the door and kind of seeing what he likes, and if he trusts in that roster, then plug that hole wherever you think it is in the draft, and then go get it. go get your ring, bro, and make sure Tom Brady doesn't get one. Right, next we're going to Thornsy for your mystery worst to first pick.
Yeah, so initially I was going to go with the Bengals, like I said earlier, but I think Shaps really touched on a lot of the points I was going to go for, this Joe Burrow sophomore breakout sort of point. So I'll go for a much more. No, I loved it. I think choosing Burrow as a breakout was much more like on point than going for the Bengals as a whole. Because I think where Burrow goes, the Bengals are going to go. So I think that was a much nicer way to look at it. So anyway, I've sort of shifted to a much more basic, much more obvious pick, and that's the San Francisco 49ers. I think that, Super Bowl runners up, and then I think he got 6 wins last year. Like, it's a big cop out. It's a very, very obvious pick, but I think when you talk about worst to first, they're the team that's going to do it. They're the team that didn't play well this year, didn't win games this year, and next year they're going to come and be like playoff contenders, potentially get a first round bye, really like come back to exactly where they were. And like all you have to do, I've literally got it on the screen right now, is look at their injuries. Like George Kittle went from 975 snaps in 2019, first Pro Football Focus ranked player, down to 443 the next year. Deebo Samuel 850 to 300, Raheem Mostert 460 to 230, Nick Bosa 920 to 70, Richard Sherman 1000 to 300, D Ford 300 to 46, and Quan Williams 730 to 280. So like, just off the bat, injuries. And I think injuries are a big decider in teams that go worst to first generally. Like, it's not always about players that develop and have these surges and guys that come out of nowhere to be great. A lot of the time it's guys who were just down last year because of injuries that bounce back. So I think that in that lens, the 49ers are a big choice. And I think it comes down to one sentence, like, they were in the Super Bowl last year and they've still got that core. So it's easy, but I'm gonna stick with it.
Do you think they finish first in that division with a certain Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, in 2019 he was the 13th ranked QB in the league according to Pro Football Focus, and I don't think Jimmy G is a real, like, on Move the Sticks they have this discussion where they talk about trucks and trailers and QBs who will be the guy like Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Brady, and then they have guys who are more a product of their offense. And I think Garoppolo is definitely like a product of the guys around him and the scheme that he's in. But if Mostert's injury, if Mostert's healthy, the O-line is healthy, and Deebo Samuel's back, they potentially get another rookie receiver or offensive weapon in the draft, and Brandon Ayuk, another guy who we could have easily have spoken about in sophomore breakouts, he's back, like a full off season under his belt. Jimmy Garoppolo, I don't think he can get worse. I think the scheme, the playmakers, the O-line, the defense he'll have behind him, like, I think he's just in the perfect situation for any QB. So, yeah.
Yeah, you've not really left me much to add because you've gone for such a boring choice there. Like the 49ers are a quality team with quality players that got really unlucky last year. There's no two ways about it. Nick Bosa's obviously coming back as well. He's a big piece of the defense that will be nice to see back in action. And yeah, I think it's a case of, I completely agree with what you're saying about Garoppolo. He might not be a well-beaten QB, but you listed some of the weapons they have. All he has to do is put it in their hands and let them do the damage. It's as simple as that. And yeah, well, with that division, I think it sort of helps them as well because of how competitive their division is. It can help them in the way that in the way that like the other teams are going to also be losing tightly fought games in the division. So you're not going to see a team, in my opinion, really go like I know the Seahawks went 12-4, but I don't think you'll see that next year. You've got the Cardinals who've upgraded. They've got, as we spoke about earlier, they're going to have that Reddick D line. But yeah, you got the Rams who've brought in Stafford. Like, it's a stacked division, and I think it being a stacked division, yeah, basically means it's up for grabs because the 49ers are just as good as any team in that division. Maybe the only thing I'd say they're lacking in is they probably do have the weakest quarterback in the division. But like I said, I think they've got some of the best weapons in the division. So yeah, it'll be fascinating to watch. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that as a boring pick. I think the other choice was the Jets, but I think that was just way too much of a reach, especially like I was going to say about, Robert Saleh's going to have this crazy influence and they're going to get Zach Wilson and he's going to be awesome. And if they trade for Deshaun Watson and all this stuff, and I sort of thought, no, like they'll be better, but no, not worth the first.
Yeah, I think Saleh is going to have kind of the like Brian Flores effect in that they brought him in because he is class at his job, and hopefully he can like just be given the time to mold that team, because that is going to be once he gets the pieces and he gets in the room with the players, that team is going to compete every week because he won't let them, get through games and tank. That might be the approach of the front office, but Robert Saleh's not going to let that team. He's going to want them to play hard, gritty football and physical football every week. And to finish off the podcast quite nicely with something that we all want to talk about, Shaps, I think you're taking us over to the fun coast of the NFC.
Yeah, well, I wanted to go AFC, but if I'm being completely honest, like Thornsy alluded to, I just don't see any of it. I could go out there, like the Jets aren't gonna suddenly transform into the first team in the division. I don't see it. The Broncos, they've got the Chiefs. That's enough said. The Bengals, and the Raiders. Yeah, sorry,
and the Chargers.
Yeah. And then the AFC North, which is the best division in football, that had three teams that went to the playoffs last year. Well, I think Pittsburgh might fall off. I think the Ravens and Browns are still very good, and I don't think the Bengals will improve enough to get there. And the Jags were going to be my pick, if I'm being honest. I was going to say they're going to draft Trevor Lawrence. They're going to be the best team out there. They're going to be amazing. But like Fonzie said, I wanted to put it in a bit of realism. So I went much more realistic than a bad team winning the NFC East. Because, that's all I can say. So the Eagles finished 4-11-1 last year in the NFC East. Not a great record, not an awful record. But the team that won it, obviously Washington, had a 7-9 record. So I think that really says it all, if I'm being honest. Eagles, they've gone through a bit of a structural change this offseason. They're potentially, by the looks of it, they're having Jalen Hurts as the man and potentially bringing in another QB. I don't think they're sold on Hurts, but I think for at least next season we can say Hurts is the man. I think I can say that with a fair confidence, unless they really mix things up. But yeah, so the Eagles, I look at their roster. If I'm being honest, I just look at any roster in the NFC East and I just see a complete void, lack of talent. I think the only team that can really challenge in the NFC East, other than the Eagles, is the Cowboys. The Cowboys went 6-10 without Dak Prescott. However, I would like to point out, without Dak Prescott, I think they won like 2 games. They started off like 4-2 with him and then fell off the map or something. I might be wrong with that, but yeah. So if Dak Prescott's back to his best, that's obviously the thorn in my side. But I want to see a running first. I want to see a running first Eagles QB who's just I just want to see the pound and ground. I want to see bad quality read option football, fumbles, interceptions. I want to see the big mess that is the NFC East, and I want to see Eagles sat on top of the throne of just feces. Like, there's no two ways about it. Avoiding swearing there, but yeah, I could just it's just I just can't get over it. I just wanted to bring us to the NFC East because it's just such a bad division. I don't think, like, it's just such a bad division. I basically had no other choice because we spoke about, obviously, the Falcons was your choice. I spoke about the Lions being in rebuild mode. Thornsy had the 49ers. Then, like I said, with the NFC, with the AFC, I can't see anyone there. So, yeah, it left me with the worst division in football.
The best of a bad bunch. But it kind of ties in quite nicely with, weirdly, what you said about the 49ers being in one of the better divisions, and everybody kind of tripping over each other and everything like that. The same thing happens in the NFC East, but almost the opposite effect of they just lose games just for the sake of it. But
cool. Yeah, I think the NFC East is going to be like such an interesting division just because of how the teams are all sort of at similar stages. Like, they've all got pieces to contend, and yet they're all so far away from contending. So that's going to be really, really interesting. But I think something that I think a lot of people forget is how quickly the NFL can change. Like, if you look at the NFC West, like 4 or 5 years ago, everyone was like, oh, the Seahawks have got the easiest division. Like, the Niners would jank, the Cards would just sort of starting to rebuild, the end of the Carson Palmer era. The Rams were the Rams. And that's the thing. Like, now you say, oh, the Rams are the Rams. And it's like, yeah, what's your point? But you say that like 5 years ago and everyone's like, oh, yeah, the Rams are the Rams. So it's like, I think in 2 or 3 years, we could even be looking back and saying like, oh, look how rubbish the AFC North is. You know, look how rubbish who would have thought the Browns would be that good? How did they make it to the AFC divisional round or whatever? But
I did.
You know, but that's like my point is how, I mean, just look at the Browns, like how they've gone from being a literal meme where like that was their currency was just not seriousness to being like a team that genuinely challenged the Chiefs. Like, obviously the QB got injured, blah blah blah, but they still gave a good fight against a good team on the road. Anyway, I have 2 questions. Obviously Jalen Hurts, like you spoke about it being his team, like how much of his prospects as the future starter for the Eagles are going to be dependent on how many wins he gets this year, and how, not necessarily how well he plays, but how many wins he gets and how he positions the Eagles to get those wins. And also, you know, you spoke about the NFC East as being like a complete meme and just like, you know, what was it, the throne of feces or the king of the feces or whatever it was. Do you think there are units like in that division that are like genuinely talented? Like, obviously the Cowboys offense and all their receiving talent, the Washington football team and their defense, and even like maybe the Giants. Like, I know they had some stretches last year where their defense and their offense played fantastically, but specifically, like, I think Washington is the one that I would pick as like the premier unit in the NFC East at the moment.
Yeah, I might be showing bias as an offensive player, but for me, my worry with my pick was the Cowboys with Prescott back. That was my worry. However, I'm not sure. I think he might be slightly limited because I think he had a very severe ankle injury, and obviously with ankle injuries, they're the new serious. I don't think he's going to be as mobile next year, basically, and I think that's a large part of his game. So then you speak when I speak about the Cowboys offense, but I do agree it's a very good unit. But I also think their run game's gone down the toilet a little bit, which was their thing. But yeah, so I think the Cowboys offense might not be as explosive as it potentially could be next year. Not for any reasons. I love Dak Prescott as a player, but I think he might be slightly limited at first because of his mobility issues. I hope obviously he's not. And then you mentioned the Washington defense, the Washington football team defense, which is a unit with a lot of talent. It's got players. There's no two ways about it. They've clearly built around the idea that it's not my comment to make, but I'll steal it anyway. It's offense wins games and defense wins championships. But to win a championship, you've got to win enough games. And the Washington offense, it does have it's McCoultry or
Terry McLaurin.
That's it, McLaurin. Thank you.
Macaulay Culkin.
I think that's where I was getting confused actually. Yeah. But it's got that receiver. We'll call him that receiver. It's got McLaurin, and other than that, the football team I don't think offers a whole lot offensively. But I don't think they can put up the points to win. Because you look at some teams that have been carried by their defense. I think about the Bears teams from the last few years, where they had that Bears team still had great offensive players, just a bad QB. I think that football team is going to have works quite well with that football team. The Washington football team is going to have one offensive player that is really someone to strike home about. No, I might be missing someone, but in my opinion, I don't think they've got enough talent offensively to put up a fight. And then going off that leads to your other comment about Jalen Hurts. I am a Jalen Hurts fan. I think he's got great character. I think he's got great character, but I don't see him as a franchise QB in the NFL. However, I can see you alluded to it earlier about sort of the momentum shifts of the NFL and like how the game's always evolving and changing. That you said it more in like a team standpoint and how divisions can change, but you also think how much football changes. And you look at the more mobile QBs coming in now, and they sort of mobile QBs tend to come in phases and go in phases. And I think there's space in the East for a mobile QB. Like you look at the defenses, Jalen Hurts could put up yards against that Cowboys defense. Other than Diggs, I don't think they've got many great defensive players, and especially in the secondary. So I think he can put up yards against them. I think he could put yards up against the Giants defense. The only one I'd say is obviously the football team defense might be slightly hard to get past, but I don't think they're gonna score much. So I just see the Eagles in their own division. I see the Eagles dominating, and if you're dominating your own division, you're more likely to win your division. Like simple as that. Like we said.
Yeah, cool. It's it'll be exciting to see going forward, and we've only got under 2 months now until the draft, boys. So we're getting warmer, but like I said, we've got 16 or so days from day of recording till the till free agency starts or till the new league year starts. So it's exciting going forward. And one thing I'm excited about is that next week is our mock draft 1.0, boys. So let's get hyped for that. And I can't wait to see what your picks are next week. So nice one, Shaps. Have a good week, bro.
Thanks very much. You too, my friend. And you, Mr. Forwards.
Take it
as well.
See you next time, Thorns.
Thank you. Thanks for listening.